Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Center for Public Policy Research Dialogue. I am Dr. Dritishri Bordaloy, Senior Research Associate in the International Relations Vertical at CPPR and the moderator of today's webinar. Today's webinar is titled India-China 2025, Rebuilding Trust Amidst Tariffs and Geopolitical Shifts. As India and China mark their 75 years of diplomatic ties on April 1st, 2025, their relationship reflects both convergence and competition. India and China seem to be reviving their dialogue of cooperation against the backdrop of uncertainty created by the imposition of US tariffs and broader shifts in the global order. In recent months, there have been indications of a thaw in the Sino Indian relations, even as conflicting pressures continue. This includes heightened economic coercion through regulations on critical minerals, agricultural supplies, high speed rail equipment, and electronics. Paradoxically, these frictions have unfolded alongside gestures of engagement, such as India's participation in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in the foreign ministers' meeting and government proposals to permit Chinese firms up to 24% stakes in Indian companies without prior clearance, and the reinstatement of tourism visas, direct flights, and border agreements. Indian Prime Minister Modi's visit to China on August 31st for the SCO's two-day summit was widely interpreted as a symbolic gesture of goodwill. PM Modi emphasized that China and India should act as partners rather than rivals, while Chinese President Xi Jinping echoed the same sentiment, calling it the right choice for China and India to be good and neighborly friends. These exchanges and accompanying visuals sparked hopes that the two Asian powers might finally chart a path towards greater stability in their ties. However, such optimism risks overlooking the persistent underlying tensions. The SCO itself reflects an interesting dynamic for Beijing. It serves as a vehicle to project regional leadership, whereas for New Delhi, participation may be more about ensuring it remains engaged in the regional order. India remains cautious about China's use of BRICS as a platform to advance its global influence and perspectives, particularly through its development initiatives. While bilateral ties have shown improvement since October 2024, border agreement, the absence of President Xi Jinping from the Rio summit limited the scope for a direct meeting with PM Modi, an opportunity that could have further supported the ongoing rapprochement. This raises the question, beyond symbolic gestures, is a genuinely friendly partnership between India and China either feasible or sustainable? While both countries share clear incentives to cooperate, unresolved disputes cast doubt on the durability of any rapprochement. The broader political context, shaped in part by Trump's tariff policies, has shifted dynamics. In the end, normalization may prove fragile at best as structural tensions continue to undermine trust, leaving India exposed to the risk of growing Chinese influence in the region. Now, this webinar is an opportunity to reflect on these realities and whether India and China can recalibrate their relationship at this juncture, transforming dialogues into sustainable frameworks for cooperation while managing rivalry and ensuring stability in a rapidly changing global order. Before we delve into our conversation, I would like to introduce you to our esteemed panelists for the day. We are honored to have a distinguished panel of Mr. Vappala Balachandran, IPS retired, and Commodore R. Seshadri Vasan, Indian Navy retired. Mr. Vappala Balachandran is a Mumbai-based columnist, author, security and intelligence expert who retired as Special Secretary, Cabinet Secretariat, Government of India. He is a former police officer who worked in Maharashtra state for 17 years between 1960 and 1976. He was awarded the Indian Police Medal in 1976 and President's Police Medal in 1986 for meritorious services. On 9 January 2024, his long interview was published in the prestigious international journal Intelligence and National Security under the series Profiles in Intelligence. He is the only Asian whose profile has been published in this journal. Mr. Balachandran has authored 5 books, and his latest book, published by C. Hurst and Co. London and by Pentagon Press, New Delhi, is titled India and China at Odds in the Asian Century. I welcome you to this webinar, Mr. Balachandran. Also joining us in the conversation we have with us today, Commodore R.S. Vasan, Director General at Chennai Center for China Studies and Regional Director at National Maritime Foundation, Tamil Nadu, an alumnus of the Defense Services Staff College, the Naval War College, and International Visitor Leadership Program USA. Commodore S. Vasan has a distinguished service of over 34 years in the Navy and the Coast Guard. He was the chairman of Aeronautical Society of India, Chennai Charter, and the director of the Asian Bureau of the World Border Police, director at Texco, and president of the Navy Foundation Chennai Chapter. Commodore Vasan's core interests are related to understanding China's moves in the regional and global calculus, maritime security and safety, blue economy neighborhood policies, Indo-Pacific and the Indian Ocean region. I welcome you to this webinar, Commodore Vasan.
Thank you.
So let us dive straight in. We shall begin with a question to Mr. Balachandran. I want to begin by asking you, in the context of the escalating tariffs and shifting global alignments, how do you assess India and China recalibrating their economic and strategic relationship?
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for including me in this panel. It's a great pleasure to talk to all of you. Well, I am not a trade specialist. I am more of a strategic, I would say, student. I can't say that I am a strategic planner, but I'm certainly a student, having studied China for the last 30 years. Now, I find that suddenly improving relationship, yes, no doubt. We had Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit in August. Then also our Prime Minister attended the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in August. Well, the signals are, and then the flights have started, operating between two countries. The signs are good. But does that mean that the confidence, the level of confidence between two countries is restored? I would say to the pre-1962 level or post-1988 level, when Rajiv Gandhi had made a successful visit, and that went on till about 1998. In my study, I divide the Indo-China relationship in terms of Japanese word sakura. Sakura is cherry blossom. So we had a cherry blossom time, sakura time between after we won independence till 1962. 1962 to 1988, it was a bad period. And again, another sakura season between 1988 to 1998. 1998, after our Pokhran 2 experiment or explosion, there was a letter written by the then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. It was a secret letter to President Bill Clinton, blaming our northern neighbor for the necessity to have a nuclear experiment. Now that unfortunately was leaked Before even the president could read, it was leaked to the New York Times, causing a lot of embarrassment between in both countries, in India and United States. And since then, you find, and then more recently, India's active participation of Quad, which Chinese people are interpreting as an alliance against them. So these are the background. Now, what does the history reveal? Now, and another thing, another important document which I've studied and I mentioned in my book also, the U.S. National Security Council, National Intelligence Council, NIC. NIC is their analysis body. They had published in Global Trends 2040, and this was published in 2021. In Asia, China expects difference from neighbors on trade, resource exploitation, and territorial disputes. This is what they have so far. Whatever NIC as they have been publishing this periodical analysis for the last so many years, and it has come true. So you find that the Chinese, right from the beginning, now what is happening is that as the trade between different countries and China are expanding, even Harvard University and others are having tutorials to their corporate clients how to negotiate with China. Now, in 1994, US National Defense University had published a volume. Uh, this was titled as Chinese at the Negotiating Table, because for them also it is very new. In fact, this was highlighted by Dr. Kissinger when he went to, in 1971, preparatory to President Nixon's visit to uh, Beijing. So even he found that they are very difficult negotiators, where their history, there is a Maoist idea of negotiating, history, tradition, ideology, prejudices, dogma, all come into play. So the no doubt China is our largest trading partner. It is 2024, 2025. It's about 128 billion. But unfortunately, it is one-sided. The Chinese are exporting, as the anchor already said, electronics, lithium, rare metals, etc., iron ore, and other things. And India, at that time, there was an estimate that India depends upon China for 68% of active pharmaceutical ingredients, API. This is called API. Another estimate said it put it as 85%. And last year, Economic Times said that we have to depend upon China on medical equipment like sensors, etc., imaging technology. During the COVID time, Wall Street Journal had published an article that the Chinese may even weaponize that particular advantage. So the task before us is not just bilateral visits and other thing. You know, all the front what do you call the protocol type of visits, but deeper. Is there a meeting of minds? Has it been, has the confidence been restored? In the Harvard and also the Macaster, that is that's a think tank on China based in Europe. They, emphasize two words in Chinese: guanxi, meaning personal connections building. The other thing is meanxi, personal dignity handling, etc. Now, in the uh, National Defense University's uh, publication of 1994, they have very recently I wrote a column on this. This was written uh, by Dr. Alfred Wilhelm, former vice president of the Atlantic Council, and Its preface was written by Ambassador Alexis Johnson, who had negotiated with China at Geneva and Warsaw before diplomatic relations started in 1979. Now, there, what is Mao's principle? That he has said that relationship, the Chinese relationship with others would be to prevent any relationship that might appear to subordinate China's interests, political, ideological, economic, cultural, or military, to any big power or bloc of powers after 100 years of suffering and humiliation due to Western imperialism. Now, he calls 100, when China was fragmented, made into certain, there were foreign enclaves all over. So they said that even if we lose it, even if we lose the trade, even we lose our treaty or whatever it is, we will not forsake this principle. That you find even now there is a mention about this. Now, the second principle which has been said is he expected other countries to conform to China's norms and values. China would uphold the principle of equality and mutual benefit, but surprisingly, the door swings inward than outward. And then they use certain phrases in China to describe the relationship. Tanpan suggests that both parties, even hostile, are serious to see that the situation does not get worse. Huitan, I may not be pronouncing this correctly, I don't know Chinese language, I only read this in English, is used for normalization talks. It connotes trust with no hostility. Hushang is used between friendly countries, and Shishang connotes greater level of trust and used for consulting. Now you'll find that when you study the history, China and Pakistan had such great comfort at that time. In 1971, Kissinger had three routes open for negotiating with China. One was through Pakistan, of course, that is their very close friend, and second was through Ceausescu, who was also friendly with China, who was in Romania, and third was their ambassador in Paris, was a long march veteran. Ultimately, China insisted that we will negotiate only through Pakistan. So that is why that famous secret trip of Kissinger to Pakistan up from Delhi, complaining of Delhi Belly, and he pretended to be sick, and then actually he took off in a plane to Beijing, and then finally Nixon's visit 1972 happened. So you find that if you this is the last thing, that in the Shishang cannot get greater level of trust and use for consulting. Now, when all these things are going on, I'm not saying that our relationship with China will not improve. I'm not saying that the trade, relation will also not improve. But we have to be very, very careful, as presently the latest standoff between. Originally, we thought that China would be willing. In fact, uh, President Trump was speaking in a very differential term with the Chinese president. And now, so all of a sudden, he has started talking about imposing 100% tariff. China has hit back. Even in today's papers have said that China will not succumb to any of these pressures. So in trade, well, resuming airlines, the other relationship, etc., is not that difficult. Whereas our trade negotiators have to win their confidence. This is my feeling, and then only to balance our present trade. And you see, when you look around in the South Asia or other East Asia, you find that even countries who had fought wars like in India, like Vietnam, which fought a very bloody war in which they lost about almost Chinese. They say that PLA lost about 40,000 soldiers, and Vietnam lost about 10,000 soldiers. Even now, they are, they are resisting the pressure from United States to join them to confront China. They said that our policy with China and our policy with the Western countries are different. We segment, we compartmentalize our, and we don't want to lose uh, the trade relationship with China. Same thing even with Philippines. Same thing to some extent even in South Korea. They're not prepared to sort of join up with the Western bloc to to sort of push down China. So this is the global scenario. So in these circumstances, we have to be very cautious. We have to negotiate for a long time. We be prepared for a long time to see that an agreement which will be satisfactory to India. Even now, well, our trade is the highest, biggest partner. But then, although it is lopsided, they are not buying much of our articles, our goods. And on the other hand, we are depending upon on electronic goods, the medical thing, and rare earths, etc. We have to be very, very careful. Our negotiators have to be careful to see that it doesn't break down. This is my preliminary observation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Balachandran, for highlighting the historical context and the evolving dynamics between the India-China relations, and also emphasizing how the strategic considerations have coexisted amid periods of both cooperation and conflict, and if the confidence has been restored or not between the two nations. So we'll move on to Commodore Vasan. Uh, Commodore Vasan, to what extent does India's engagement in the SCO, a pursuit of cooperation with China, as opposed to a strategic effort to maintain its presence in multilateral forums?
Thank you, Dritishri. Thanks also to Mr. Ramchandran for providing the backdrop. In my assessment, I think these are very difficult times. We have to navigate this. As has been brought out, whatever you see on the surface, whether it is resumption of Manas Sarovar Yatra or direct flights, this is on the surface. Deep down, there is still a lot of distrust, and it will take perhaps years or even decades for us to overcome this distrust, and therefore the confidence building measures are important. Chinese leaders have said it's time for the dragon and the elephant to dance together. But elephant has a different rhythm and the dragon has another rhythm. So it may be easier for the dragon and the tiger to dance together. So maybe we need to look at the developments very critically. What we also need to understand is that it did not happen entirely because of tariffs. It may have accelerated the process of reset between India and China, but there's already a momentum that was taking place because there's something like 25 WMCC meetings had taken place, and both sides had realized that there is mutual dependence. While we are dependent on APIs, on heavy machinery, on rare earths, on semiconductors, and that like, China needed a market. It's not that they're going to suddenly abandon the market, particularly in the light of tariffs that are being imposed on by them. If you are facing 100% tariff, you would rather export it to countries who do not have similar kind of excessive, punitive tariffs on you. Therefore, India, or for that matter, any other country which has had trade relations, despite Galwan, I must tell you that despite Galwan, our trade never came down; it only kept going up. So, this is where we have to be careful about, where we are headed. There's doubtlessly a need for reset, but it cannot be on Chinese terms. Chinese are quite happy with the developments now for one simple reason. All this while, this is what they've been saying. So let's normalize trade, let's have other equations, but let's put the border aside. So the only development I can see is that the border developments, the talks will continue. We've not been able to resolve. But it's important to know that They would like to resolve this on their terms, and India is not giving even a quarter. So this is where there are issues between us and China. And also, as far as SEO is concerned, I'm happy that the Prime Minister attended the SEO because it also opens up our avenues with Central Asian Republic, which are again important for our trade and connectivity. We're looking at Chabahar, we're looking at access to Central Asian Republic, and all these are issues that are of importance. So the SEO, that from that point of view, the attendance after 7 years or whatever, was I think, a great event in terms of normalization of India's participation in the SEO. So China also was happy that India participated in this because this is, of course, a grouping of people. You have Russia, China, and India who are together there, and other Central Asian Republic countries who are important to both China and India, and even Russia for that matter. So India will have to be in the game and will have to ensure that our interests are protected, trade interests, connectivity interests are protected, because after all, we are still the fastest growing economy. So if you are growing at 7.5%, it cannot be sustained unless you have the entire supply chains, which are well oiled and moving all the time, and also finding new markets like China always does. So we need to be able to move on to Central Asian Republic, Afghanistan, which is opened up another window now, and therefore the participation in SEO, in my assessment, was something that was timely, and we need to cash on what is there. I think the policymakers, the leaders, the strategists are quite clear that we are not totally in a mutual trust mode. We are not trusting China, not as China trusting. So this is where there is some kind of a bond of convenience. So they would like to use what you require and export it, and we would like to import all these things so that our industrial machinery is not put to stop, and our growth trajectories are not impaired, and our supply chains, which are critical, are not stopped. So since we are talking about SEO, it's all about our participation in a multilateral forum where two other important players are there, like India and China and Russia, and all the other smaller countries who are looking up to whichever country is willing to invest for their development and infrastructure. That's the story of all developing countries. So there is no escape, including India. We also would require some investments in some of the sectors, and this is where the participation in SEO has been of great significance. So I think I'll stop with that because you said we must stop in 5 minutes. So I can come back to you depending
Yes.
on the thread and the follow-up questions.
Okay. Thank you, Commodore Vasan, for emphasizing the delicate balance between India and China, where deep-seated mistrust still persists, but it will take decades to overcome. And it's a gentle reminder to the panelists just to keep the time in mind so that we can cover many topics within the stipulated time. So my next question is to Mr. Balachandran. China has tightened regulations on critical minerals, agricultural supplies, and electronics. So from a strategic point of view, how should India respond to such coercion while also maintaining a bilateral trade?
Well, as I mentioned, we are in no position to respond to such coercion for the simple reason that we need it. The 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 ground rule for all such relationship is who needs whom. We need them, and if they don't supply, we'll have to go to somebody else, and that somebody else is not there. Even US is finding that difficulty. So what type of coercion can we do it? Now there is, you can try military posture. Are we that powerful enough to challenge China? Now there is an old CIA estimate which was released in 1979 at the height of Soviet-China border war. And at that time, they were very clearly said that China, when the political relationship worsens, will keep on indulging in border incursions to irritate people. And so we are also not in a position to use that military power to sort of put any pressure on them. Nor are we able to have an assembly of East Asian nations to support us to put pressure on China. So what can we do regarding critical minerals, agriculture supplies, and electronics? The other way is to pick up. Now, when you start, when I started writing the book, I started. I read it that time. In 1980, we were on par. China and India were on par. That was the time when we had Asian Games. The color television was introduced, and the agriculture's economist Dr. Gulati had said that Chinese food production was even lower than India's. From there, what progress they have achieved, what progress we have achieved. Why couldn't we build up on that electronic prowess which was shown in the Asian Games to improve our electronic industry production? In 1990s, we also thought of India being the center of pharmaceutical industry. Why couldn't we do that? We have not been able to do it. I'm not blaming anybody. I know that there is a what is called a chaos of democracy. We don't have it. I mean, we have the China doesn't have it. China doesn't have any chaos of democracy. We have now. If you see the our governments from 1990 to say up to 2000, how many times there was no practically there was no sort of emphasis on catching up with China, or that and nobody even noticed that China was uh, sort of catching up with the West. In fact, I remember there was a report that Dead Shopping Institute had told Rajiv Gandhi in 1988 that China has no superpower ambition at all. But that's not what happened. Very cleverly, they managed to please the West and to get into the WTO. And that was a breakthrough for them. And they kept quiet. In fact, there is a National Intelligence Council's paper. They were asked by the US government to study whether the entry of China would be in favor of the Western, especially American influence. At that time, it was a very long paper which I read, in which they came to the conclusion that the leadership after Tiananmen Square incident, etc., it is stabilized, it is with technocrats, it is predictable, they are run by institutions. So, America supported China to get into the WTO. And that was another boost for their economic ambitions. So they did it. They now they are catching up with China, with the USA. In fact, in certain assessments say that in science and technology they have overtaken, research they have overtaken, pharmaceutical, of course, they are overtaken, in rare metal they have overtaken. So we lagged behind. I'm not blaming anybody, any political leadership or anything. It just so happened that maybe there is some fault somewhere, but we have no uh, power to respond. The only way is to build upon the present improvement in bilateral relationship, and as you would see, China has been quite generous. I'm not talking about the Belt and Road Initiative where there are different interpretations. It's a rehash of their old, tributary system, which was the prehistoric times. I've also mentioned in my book about it, that this could be Belt and Road system, could be a rehash of the old tributary system in which China considered the other countries as their vassals. And there is a lot of research done by the Harvard University in the 1940s about it. So, but China has been generous. China has been generous. I'm not saying that we should appeal to them, but let us normalize our relationship, talk to them, and then I mean, it's not that we are going to join the Chinese camp or anything like that, but as an independent country, we may be able to wrest some concession from them. But I don't believe that we have any power for economic coercion on bilateral trade. Thank you.
Okay. So you highlighted the complexities of India-China economic interdependence and the challenges and the strategic considerations in responding to such regulations. Moving on to a question to Commodore Vasan. So what are the implications of the China's Belt and Road Initiative and India's economic and regional security interests in that?
Thank you. I think I need to just add on a little more to what Mr. Balachandran said as far as parity is concerned. And I think it's an illusion to say that we have achieved parity. It's not going to happen in a hurry. We have a long, long way to catch up. And if you have to catch up at the present rate of growth, it will take you perhaps 10 or 15 years. Now, we should be very, very conscious of the total volume of our GDP, which is at about $4.5 trillion. China is at 18 or 19 US trillion dollars, and US itself is at about 22. So you can see that China is something like 4 to 5 times the GDP of India. If that is the differential that we have, so you do not want further turbulations, and therefore we need to normalize relation to our advantage so that the growth trajectory can be maintained. Now coming to BRI, I think India has been consistent in saying that we will not support the BRI, and therefore it has abstained from BRF. It has also resisted any kind of pressure from China to be even an observer perhaps in the BRF. And our concerns are very, very straightforward. One is the opaque nature of contracts that are drawn up, which is evident in Hambantota, which is evident in Godar, which is evident in various other places where China has invested along the BRI road. It's an old Silk Route, but they also are very imaginative. And they said, okay, this is also the Maritime Silk Route. Then they have a digital Silk Route. So a whole lot of Silk Routes have been added to increase their influence by providing investments. Every country, like I said earlier, requires investment. And therefore, this is what is used by China to ensure that its surplus capacity and capability. Because, what we are very clear, because domestically they are not able to consume as much as they did in the past. There is a slowdown, and therefore to match with the capacity and capability and to keep the workers active, they need external markets. This was also another consideration for China to expand through the BRI, the MSR, and various other forms of engagement and investments. So BRI, as far as it's concerned, if you look at it dispassionately, it has helped to certain extent these countries who are the recipients of these investments. But the negative side is that it's also enabled them, or it's enabled China rather, to get them into a debt trap. So, this is very evident, and you saw what happened in Sri Lanka. I quoted very often to say that when they were unable to pay some $8 billion, China was able to swallow up Hambantota for 99 years. So this is a model which is not liked by now. Malaysia, when Mahathir had come back to power, he reviewed his own projects and cancelled 2 of them and modified them later. So obviously, the nature of investments which are there are such that the opaque contracts, apparently they say something like 80 to 85% of the aid that is given is to go back to China through equipment, through engineers, through consultation, through workforce, etc. So therefore, the recipient country, whether Sri Lanka or Bangladesh or any other African country, does benefit very little. Therefore, the workforce that they want to employ also comes from China, except for menial labor. So therefore, we have been, I think, quite clear about our stand on BRI. We understand that there's a requirement for investing a lot of money. Something like $1.3 trillion is what is the amount that's being talked about for developmental projects. In the case of Pakistan, again, we opposed to any investment along the China-POK economic corridor. I've always told my researchers that they should not refer to this as CPEC, because then we are legitimizing the fact that Pakistan owns it. Pakistan does not own this portion. Therefore, In all our research activities, we always refer to this as China POK economic order. So the China POK economic order has issues of sovereignty, and therefore, as long as there are sovereignty issues, India will not be a party to any of the BRI investments. They may come selectively. Now there's been some relaxation in allowing Chinese to invest in certain areas, but it's not along the BRI. But it's in some select sectors where China will be allowed to invest with certain amount of controls. They are not going to be in the critical sectors. They're not going to be in sectors that are likely to be used for eavesdropping, like in telecom and other areas. So therefore, these are areas where I think the government of the day is well aware of how they need to handle BRI. The countries around us. It also changes the entire, complex situation in the maritime neighborhood, whether they're investing in Bangladesh or Myanmar or Sri Lanka or Maldives. It allows them access to these ports. And some of these ports can become dual use ports. That is a concern along the maritime sector. So we would like to watch, or we have a big advantage of geography, where both the eastern and western flanks and our outposts in Andaman Nicobar and Lakshadweep Minicoy provide us phenomenal reach to monitor the activities, and therefore I don't think they enjoy a great advantage, except perhaps in Djibouti, which is a military base where they have deployed their military assets. So overall, BRI is something which is work in progress as far as China is concerned. The BRI 2.0, as per reports, is something that would perhaps be more environment friendly, because Chinese also have realized that there is reluctance by countries to accept this. One example I can give is that in Pakistan, while they said we are committed to green energy, Pakistan, they exported polluting thermal plants. So this was the commitment to green energy. I'm okay in my home, but outside I'll export also. So there are serious issues on BRI. It is not something that has only benefited China. And if one wants to make an impartial, dispassionate assessment, it is to say that it's a win-win only for China.
Thank you. Thank you, Aris Vasan, for highlighting the strategic and economic implications of the BRI and including even the investments angle to it, while noting how it reshapes the neighborhood. And going to Mr. Balachandran, so given China's dominance in global manufacturing, what targeted policies could India adopt to counter potential supply chain vulnerabilities without provoking regulatory measures?
Well, I've already answered the second question, that we are not in a position to adopt any countermeasures as long as we do need that is the frustration of President Trump also. Now, the only way we could have achieved to sort of, to make China realize that they shouldn't hold up those metals or whatever they have and which they're not willing to part with others, is to have an alliance. We tried to do that through Quad, but Quad is not working. Quad is, in fact, this year's summit of Quad in New Delhi may even be counterproductive for our interests. So how do we do it? If it had been possible for any regional alliance, India, I do not think India left to itself will be able to take any countermeasures to ensure these potential supply chain, or rather to avoid the vulnerabilities. It depends upon them. Now, shipping, we can close some shipping line. Is that possible? No. At one time we thought that we'll be able to choke them, the Chinese ships, etc. But they have even challenged the American naval ships, and they're not been able to do it. America is not even able to help the Philippines, with whom they have a defense pact. With the Chinese transgressions, very recently China had damaged one Philippine ship, just about they were yesterday. So, in such circumstances, to think that we will be in a position to left alone to adopt countermeasures, I think it's a bit too much to be believed. We have tried to sort of, during the last 10 years, we have tried to sort of line up with other people, tried to revive the Quad and so many other things. They're not able to do it. So the only way we can try is to bring it back, the relationship back to say 1988 level when Deng Xiaoping said, told Mr. Rajiv Gandhi at that time, we have both committed mistakes. Let us avoid that for the betterment of Asia. And that is how the whole word, the expression of Asian century came. That we went on for some time till, as I said, 1988, when the relationship had a sort of big strain due to that exposed letter from Mr. Vajpayee to President Clinton. And then onwards, it has been down, down throughout the sort of decades. So I have no answer to this third question, that we can ensure that they should supply us, the supply chain should be uninterrupted. We can appeal to the WTO. But America's unilateral action, Trump's tariff, is completely diluted the importance of WTO. And WTO, when will they give a verdict? By that time, our supplies will not be there at all. So that is why I'm a bit confused. I have no answer to this particular question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Balachandran. We'll move on to the final question to Commodore Vasan. So, China's growing presence in the Indian Ocean is often seen as a strategic challenge for India. So, do you see scope for cooperation in maritime security, or is this rivalry unavoidable?
Yeah, I think that's a very important area for India, and we've been closely monitoring what's happening in our neighborhood. And as far as China is concerned, I don't think it's targeting India as such. It's got a vision. Its white paper is very clear as to what they want to achieve with the four Cs. So we come under the category of four Cs, where they'd like to have presence. So there's scientific investigation, research vessels which are coming there, and using the Maritime Silk Road to have outposts there in Indian Ocean next to us. Are all, it's a campaign that allows them the capability to build a blue water navy. They also realize that if you want to be like America, you must be capable in the maritime domain, which is why they're building carriers. The third carrier is out. The beauty is that you would have noticed that not one carrier or a carrier battle group has come to Indian Ocean region yet. So obviously they are still honing up their skills. Independently they can operate, but as a carrier battle group to be deployed in the Indian Ocean region to protect their trade and security interests is not happening in a hurry. And they are nowhere near America. They have they overtaken them in certain areas, but as far as the blue water navy is concerned, they are not there yet. By the time they build 12 more carrier battle groups, not just carriers, a complete self-capable, self-sufficient blue water navy led by the carrier battle group, supported by long-range nuclear submarines, satellites, drones, long-range aircraft, fighters, missiles, is something that's a complete composite system and which is not there yet as far as China is concerned, particularly in the maritime. That's their weak point. They know that, which is why they are not coming to Indian Ocean region. But there are these efforts to ensure that their presence and what we call in the Navy as posturing is something that's practiced regularly. In 2008, they started with the anti-piracy patrols, and 2008 onwards, they maintained this anti-piracy patrol, which is what brought out the compulsions of having a base there. which is when they went into Djibouti. So today there is a naval base. It's a different matter that Djibouti also has French, Americans, and others. But the point is that there's some place where they can turn around their ships, repair them, fuel them, and then send them back on patrols along the pirate infected routes. The whole thing was about anti-piracy patrols. And so all the countries, something like 17 navies were there at one time, looking at how to protect the maritime domain. And China also had sent their navy. But they were very wise. They used this to sort of work out on what are the hydrographic data. So they gathered a lot of hydrographic data, bathymetric data, island data, oceanic data, weather data. All this is important that should have gone into the database for deployment of a carrier battle group later, when all this data will be fed and enabled, AI enabled, for them to plan their deployments, operational sorties, and to ensure that their long-term interests are protected. Whether it's in Africa, because in all these places where we are talking about, they're investing a phenomenal amount of money. And so when you are investing so much of money, like in the CPPOK, so you need somebody to protect them. You saw that there are a lot of attacks on Chinese engineers, China infrastructure in along the China POK economic corridor. So they would not like to be left alone. So they need a capability to protect themselves, which is why they're building these capacities in far-off destinations in Asia, in Africa, and even for that matter, beyond Africa. So we have to be watchful of what is happening there. There's no need to worry about it. The only one point about Quad is that Quad is, of course, a naval kind of a thing, but they have diversified into a lot of other things are happening. It may not have addressed the supply chain initiative, the point that was referred to by Mr. Vappala. But the point is that the Quad has got many options which are useful, whether it is the Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative or the Indo-Pacific Economic Forum, or whether it is a vaccine diplomacy, or whether it is a science, technology, engineering, mathematics initiative where more than 150 people have been trained. So these give you a different kind of uh, options for us addressing the concerns of supply chain initiatives. It's related, which is why we are looking at deep sea mining. We're trying to extract rare earth materials. I think NIOT is doing a lot of work on that. We have invested a lot of money, some 70,000 crores was invested in the semiconductor industry. Foxconn is coming in a big way, of course, for iPhones, but they are also in touch with Taiwan for seeing how we can. I think recently, 2 weeks ago, there was an announcement made by Minister Ashwini was there to say that we will be having our own semiconductors. But it's not going to happen overnight because our requirements are huge. And at the moment, whether it's USA or European Union or India, the only country that can provide these is China. So therefore, we are conscious of this. So we don't want to upset the cart. So continue to look at what our options are. Invest in advanced technology. Invest and collaborate with other countries who have the capability, like Netherlands. Netherlands is in the forefront of the semiconductors and wafers and that kind of a thing. So we need to expand our engagement with those who would be in a position to help you to move away from the dependent supply chains, which has been our bane all these years. Thank you.
Thank you, Commodore Vasan. And I thank Mr. Vappala Balachandran and Commodore Vasan for sharing their insights on the India-China relations. They have highlighted the historical context, the strategic and economic dimensions, and the need to build genuine confidence beyond symbolic gestures. Despite challenges and border tensions, trade also continues to grow, and forums like SEO provide opportunities for cooperation and long term engagement. This conversation also highlighted that navigating this relationship requires a careful balance of competition as well as collaboration and long term confidence building measures, and a focus on this pragmatic engagement to have a stability in a rapidly changing regional as well as a global landscape. With that, we have come to the end of this session. I would sincerely thank our speakers and panelists today for this valuable insight and for joining us in this important conversation. I also like to thank the CPPR team for organizing this webinar. Do follow CPPR's website and social media for future events and publications. With this, we have come to this end of the webinar. I thank you all and I wish each one of you a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.